you know, it happens. They're going to miss three great comics. We're about to welcome to the stage one of my favorite comedians, one of my favorite improvisers, one of my favorite general people. He's a real delight. He performed at Space Jokes 1 and 2. Space Jokes 1, my mother attended the performance, and afterwards I asked her what her favorite joke was. And she said that her favorite joke was that one guy who offhandedly mentioned he had a neuroscience degree. And I said, Mom, that was a setup. He has a neuroscience degree. And she said, no, he doesn't. And I said, yeah, he does. He went to school for it. He has a neuroscience degree. So he has a neuroscience degree. Last week, he was bit by a therapy dog. Please welcome to the stage, Elijah Sloan!
90s kids. Hey, all you 90s kids. Do you remember those city rugs we all used to have that had like roads on them and buildings, and you could play with your toy cars on them, and you had to jump from the door frame to the rug because you couldn't touch the hardwood floor in the middle, because if you did, that was bad, and then you'd be bad, and you had to get a lucky penny to even get in your room at all? 90s kids. Hey, 90s kids, do you remember Pokemon? Oh, Pokemon was the best in the 90s, and you had to watch every episode. You had to watch every episode. You had to tape every episode on VHS, no matter when it was playing, and then you would take that tape and you would put it under your bookshelf with all the others, and you would never watch any of them. 90s kids. Hey, 90s kids, do you remember laser tag? You'd run around with those little laser tag sets around your house, and you'd like shoot all your friends, but then it would touch something bad, and then you'd have to put it in the room where all the bad things go, and then you couldn't touch it ever again. And then you'd have friends over and they'd go, hey, why can't we go in that room? And you'd say, please just don't, okay, just trust me on that. And then they would go and they'd get the set and they'd go, what happens if we touch you with this? And you go, please don't. And then you go upstairs for water later, and then you come back downstairs, and through the bottom of the stairs, they'd be poking it with you. And then you had to jump over those last 3 stairs for the rest of your life. 90s kids. Hey, 90s kids, do you guys remember Rocco's Modern Life? Oh my gosh, do you guys remember being in the shower and getting a little bit of unfiltered water in your mouth and then accidentally swallowing it and then thinking, hey, usually I use rubbing alcohol to get rid of all the contaminants and non-filtered water off of me. Maybe I should just drink all of it. So you got the whole bottle of rubbing alcohol and you tried to drink it, but at the last second your survival instinct kicks in and you just spit it all up over the porcelain ground. And then you go to the hospital, but the hospital doesn't know what to do with you, so they bring you back to that house that you're staying at on your vacation. And you go and you lay on a plastic tarp totally naked because you can't touch clothes and you can't touch anything, but for some reason plastic tarps are okay. And then you go and you can't eat any food or any water, because if you eat food or water, then you can't eat any of that food or water again because you're bad right now and you have to lay there for 3 days until the water is out of your system. 90s kids. Some 90s kids remember Prozac. Other 90s kids were so doped up on Prozac, they don't remember it at all. I've had OCD for 16 years now, which means that it's old enough to drive me to insanity. In 5 years, it's gonna be old enough to drink from the well of my sorrows. Some people think that being OCD is like super cool. They'd be like, oh my God, I'd have like such a clean house and all my roommates would love me. In actuality, the situation is that you're eating a fistful of peanuts in your kitchen and you drop half of it and they scatter all over the ground, and you can't pick them up though, because that's where the germs live. So you just kind of like scoot them over, and then your roommates come home after you've like tried to clean it up later, and they're like, has it snowed in here? And you're like, no, those are just all the paper towels from washing my hands. We're out of soap. For a long time, I kind of tried to deal with all my problems on my own. I just didn't go to therapy. I kind of tried to figure it all out myself. And what that entailed is that I did not talk about any of my problems because I operated under the strict guidelines of patient-patient confidentiality. I tried for a while to get into meditation because meditation is supposed to be like real calming and really good for anxiety. So I would try to sit there and I try to breathe in and breathe out. And for most people that works really well, but 3 of my most major fears are airborne pathogens, chemical fumes, and running out of air because there's not enough air in this room and I breathed all of it and I'm gonna suffocate in my sleep. I am really afraid of dementia. I've got a really big fear of dementia and getting it when I'm older because my grandmother has Alzheimer's and my dad's starting to show the warning signs. He doesn't remember that no matter how many times I tell him. And so the thing with dementia is that your core memories remain intact a lot longer than newer ones. So what that means is that when I'm 80, I'll be eating right, and I'll be shuffling around the nursing home, And the nurse will be like, hello, Mr. Sloan, how are you doing today? And I'll be like, oh, good. Just running a few laps, making sure that dementia doesn't get me. And then I'll run around and he'll be like, good to see you again, Mr. Sloan. And I'll be like, oh, hello. Just running a few laps, trying to make sure that dementia doesn't get me, over and over and over again. Because that memory of being afraid of dementia will last long into actually having dementia. Additionally, what that means is that I will remember telling this bit long after I forget the names of my children and wife. For a long time, I was really afraid of brain cancer. There was a man named Charles Whitman. He was a famed mass murderer. What he did was he went up to the top of the University of Texas observation tower, which was a really big tower, and he brought a gun with him, and he shot a lot of people. He injured a ton. He killed a ton. It was really, really bad. But before his death, he had written a note that said that he suspected something was wrong with him on a biological level, and that they should do an autopsy afterwards to try and figure out what it was. And they did. And they found a nickel-sized tumor pressing up against part of his brain that they suspect may have caused his aggressive, violent compulsions. For a long time, I was afraid of that happening to me, that something could just take me over and make me into a worse person. But then I started thinking about it, and that's just one place in the brain. If that tumor was maybe, say, at the front of my brain, I'd be a braver, kinder, more motivated individual. And in fact, the only reason I'm not a better person is because I don't have brain cancer. I'm not a big fan of sea salt right now. See, there was a study that came out in which they found that there were tons of microplastics in sea salt. See, what happens is plastic gets washed into the ocean and gets degraded a lot like rocks do into a form of sand, but that sand's made out of plastic. We call them microplastics. They kind of float around, and then we take them up with all the salt, and then all that plastic is actually in your sea salt. We don't know if it's bad or not, but essentially what we have is when you go to the store and you buy a bunch of sea salt, inside your plastic bag, there's a container of sea salt. And inside that sea salt, there is another tiny plastic bag. It's kind of like Russian nesting dolls and probably just as nutritious. I honestly don't know why we can call anything from the ocean a health food anyway. It's got antidepressants and hormones that we pee out and then they get washed into the ocean. It's got nuclear radiation. It's got plastic, lots of plastic, trash, and plastic. But hey, there's no fish poop anymore. We killed all the fish. I said I wasn't going to tell this joke to somebody, but I am. So, hey, Morgan, guess what? You get to figure this out now. At one point, the last time I considered seeking therapy was when I had bought a new mattress. Because I had this really small, awful twin-size mattress that I had since I was a kid, and I would like sleep on it and it would hurt and I wouldn't sleep very well. So I was like, that's what's causing my problems. I'm not sleeping well. So what I did was I went to the store and I got a Tempur-Pedic knockoff and I was like, I'm gonna sleep so well and all my problems will be solved. But instead, what happened was that mattress started doing something called off-gassing, in which lots of the chemicals that are created in the industrial process are released into the air as the mattress reinflates. And I did a series of frantic Google searches, and I don't know if you know this, but if you think something bad is happening to you, you can Google it, and someone will confirm that that is true. So, for a week, I became convinced that my mattress was killing me. I thought that it was rotting my brain, and I naturally became depressed, which was kind of tricky because the reason I was depressed was because I thought I was going to be depressed. So I just kept getting more and more depressed. My sleep number? 666. It was my fault though. I looked it up later. Turns out I had accidentally bought a traumatic memory foam mattress. Lately though, I've been having something happen that's really horrible, and it's actually caused me to go and seek professional help. It's something that I call psychic seppuku. I call it this because it feels a lot like there's just a samurai walking around, and he thinks to himself, oh, the thing I said earlier kind of sounded dumb. So that's that. So I decided to go and, get help. It's kind of like your brain is the most advanced supercomputer on the planet, maybe in the universe. It's the most complex object that we've ever found that is able to do millions of different calculations a second. It's so complex, but it's kind of like someone just took that giant supercomputer and the only thing they loaded onto it was a really shitty version of Netflix that just played your most embarrassing moments. That time I met a civil rights leader, commented that I had read his Wikipedia, and only brought up that time he was in a movie? Why did they think I would give this 5 stars? So I went and this is a true story. So I went and I tried to find help. I went onto my healthcare provider's website, which is not built for people like me. It's specifically built, I think, to try and drive off people with anxiety from actually getting help for their anxiety. See, on the website, there's just millions and millions of ceaseless entries of nothing but a name and a location, and no guide as to whether they're good, what kind of methods they use, what other patients thought about them. Nothing to help you make an informed decision. And as someone who gets panic attacks about making the right decision, I got a panic attack for looking for help for my panic attacks. But eventually after a couple weeks, powered through. I found a woman that I thought was really good, and I tried to go start seeing her. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I just cried during the first session with her. The only thing about that is that was not a session in which we talked about any of my problems. That was the intake session. So she would be asking me questions like, "Is this your correct address?" And I'd say things like, "Yeah." "Is this your correct credit card number?" And she's actually not that great a therapist. I'm in this weird place right now where everything that she does wrong, I start to think is some kind of elaborate mind game to teach me how to be a better human being. So I'll show up to her office and be sitting in the waiting room, and then I'll get an email from her being like, "Hey, can we reschedule? I'm not gonna make it today." And I go, "You know what? Things don't always work out the way that I want them to." And she'll send me an email as I'm walking up to her building being like, "Hey, I got stuck in this child custody case. I really can't come today." And I'll be like, "You know what? People do have more problems than me." And I'll show up, and the door will be locked, and I'll get bitten by a therapy dog from the neighboring office. And I'll think, you know what? My expectations are too high. I just gotta go with the flow. And that either means I'm in a really good place, or I have a really long way to go. Thanks, guys.
Eli and I have known each other for 4 years now, I believe, and I didn't plan this at all, but tonight is the most honest conversation we're ever having with each other about our mental illness. In between that conversation, please welcome to the stage a man that I lived with for a while, and when we lived together, we lived in a dorm at a school, and I moved into this dorm because his roommate had been expelled from the school. And I didn't like my roommate at the time, and he was a close friend of mine, so we moved in. But when his roommate was expelled, he was a forward thinker and immediately pushed the 2 beds that you get in the dorm to make one big bed. And the first night I was over there, we were like, we should probably separate the beds. But then we didn't. And then for half a semester, every night, we would sleep in the same bed, drinking hot apple cider and listening to Frank Sinatra records as we fell asleep and talked about our day. And I worry a lot because I know that maybe someday I'll find the right person and we'll settle down, but I don't think I'll ever be as married as I was for half a semester in my freshman year of college. He's a great friend of mine. He's a great comic. I'm very happy that we made it through the divorce and are still friends and are still talking. Please, big round of applause, penultimate comic for the evening, Erik Beringer.
3 weeks ago, I found out that koala bears don't have beaks. They look like they do. And I saw a picture of a koala bear, and I thought, that koala bear looks like it has a beak. So I looked up more pictures of koala bears, and they also looked like they had beaks. I didn't look up any information about koala bears to find out if they had beaks. I just assumed that there isn't anything in the world that looks like it has a beak, but doesn't. Because that doesn't make any fucking sense. Turns out that their whole mouth area is just a different color than the rest of their face. Like a fucking beak. I have a girlfriend. And I love her a lot. Not enough to kill her, though. That's my shortcoming. A lot of stories that you read, whether they're made-up stories or they're real stories about people who are in love, somebody kills someone that they're in love with. That's a lot of love. That's crazy. I've never loved anything enough to kill it. This is gonna be really fun. I have a beer belly from beer. Fix it for John's set. I'll just stand over here. I have a beer belly and pajama pants. And what I like to do is take my pajama pants when I'm wearing them and pull them up. Okay, fix it. Thank you. I have a beer belly from beer and pajama pants. And what I like to do is pull my pajama pants all the way up over my beer belly, like that. And then I put my hands all the way down to the bottom of my beer belly and hold it like a stack of mail. I was doing that the other day, and I realized that I wished that it was a stack of mail, because then I could take my beer belly next door to my neighbor and say, "This was delivered to me by mistake." but I can't because it's mine by not a mistake. My grandparents are awful. They were gonna vote for Ben Carson until they saw a picture of Ben Carson. Which is pretty fucking wild that they just handed that to me. They were like, hey, here's a joke for you to tell. And I said, thank you. No one says thank you anymore. It's a crowd full of people who don't say thank you. I say thank you anytime anyone does anything. I say thank you to people who are in the bathroom before me and then finish using the bathroom so that I can use the bathroom. People fucking hate that. They think it was a commentary on what they did in there, especially if you whisper it. Thank you. My cousin has horses, which is stupid. Horses are big, stupid dogs. They're harder to get rid of when you don't want them anymore. Can't put a horse in my Volvo and drive it to a park and just leave it there. Somebody's calling somebody. I don't know who's in charge of feral park horses. It might not be its own department, but it is covered by a branch of our city's government. She has horses, and I went to visit them with my cousin, not the horses. But I did see the horses. And I'm kind of a jokester. I like to tell jokes. And I went up to one of the horses and I said, "Hey, Mr. Horse, why the long face?" "Because all of my people are slaves to yours." Sorry. Rule of threes.
Hey guys, our next performer is a guy who is so great at reading audiences that he did not approve this opening bit because he thought it might seem egotistical.
He's an astronaut who's afraid of heights.
John Barnes' little sister loves him almost as much as she loves their 8-month-old half-brother.
John Barnes is a handsy man who looks silly in glasses.
John Barnes is a secret mustache.
John Barnes, his first real conversation with Keenan consisted of a bit where they were going to make out. Keenan didn't commit to it, but John Barnes did.
John Barnes once deep-throated 12 7-Eleven hot dogs to save an impoverished village, and he liked it.
John Barnes is actually 3 children in a trench coat trying to get into an R-rated movie.
John Barnes once spent every night in the year of 2013 walking to that 7-Eleven over there because he found out that they sold sodas with Shaquille O'Neal's face on them.
That wasn't a lie. I did not okay that. I was not told. So it's 2016. That's the current year. It's February. And I'm thinking a lot about what 2015 was to me, because I am an introspective person, and I spend the first 11 months of every year reflecting on the 12 months of the previous year. So I'm still pretty deep into that. There were a lot of big changes for me in 2015. I lost somewhere in the realm of 15 to 30 pounds, depending on how much water I have in my body when I weigh myself. And people compliment me on that a lot, which I don't really care for because I didn't do it on purpose. I just don't have a car, and I don't have money, so I forget to eat sometimes. And there have not been noticeable changes in my life because of this weight loss, which people always think there will be. The 2 big changes that I've noticed is I used to be a fat guy, and people would describe me as such. They would say, you know, he's kind of a chubby guy. And now people don't know how to describe me at all. I'm just a guy. I am a regular-sized guy. I'm white, which doesn't help anyone in this town describe a person. And I am of a regular height. Got kind of an annoying voice. There's not a lot there anymore. The other big difference in losing that weight is I go to like punk shows, I go to that kind of a thing, and when I was 16, I realized I was too fat to like stage dive ever again. And then this year I stage dove like 9 times. But here's the thing, I weigh like 170, 175 pounds maybe now. That's still way too fucking fat to stage dive. Stage diving is appropriate when you weigh maybe 35 pounds. Stage diving is something that only children should do, and any child who's at a show like that should fucking do it. That's cool as shit. And the other big change in my life, why did I say the other? There's 3, comic rule of 3s. We're hammering it in tonight in the last couple of sets. Second big change in my life is that I kissed someone in 2015, and I hadn't done that in 2 years. So I'm going in for the kiss, and I'm just like, I'll remember how to do this. And then I'm in the kiss, and I was like, oh, fuck! I don't know how to do this at all. I knew how to do this when I was 16, but I don't know how to do it anymore. I thought this was like riding a bike. Why did no one tell me this wouldn't be like riding a bike? Fuck, 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 fuck! And then I didn't get a second date with that girl. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in my hometown again, and I was like, I should get some exercise because I want to keep this weight off, because Sometimes people compliment me on it, and even if I don't like being complimented on that, I like being complimented. And so I try to ride a bike, and I learned riding a bike is not like riding a bike. It's a lot like kissing a person. It's a skill you have to practice and can easily forget through ill use. And then the third big change for me in 2015 is that in 2015, this was the first year since 2009 in which I at no point took an SSRI. I don't know if you guys know what those are. They're an antidepressant. It stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor. And I took them for 4 years straight. 4 years straight? 4 years straight. Maybe, yeah, somewhere in that range. And I highly recommend taking SSRIs to anyone, by the way. It's not something I'm ashamed of. It's something I'm very willing to talk about. But there's a lot of changes in your life when you make a change like that. That's a huge thing to not do that anymore. And there's a lot of changes that you notice. For instance, no one tells you when you take an SSRI that there are side effects. Because what do the side effects fucking matter? The effects is you wake up and you don't want to die anymore. The side effects are a lot of stuff, but there's sometimes the side effect is that you wake up and you want to die extra bad, which is crazy. But if you don't get that side effect, none of the other ones matter at all compared to the effect. So I never noticed that I had all these side effects until I stopped taking them, because I was like, hey, I feel like I can be a person, which was new to me when I started taking medication. So when I stopped taking medication, I found out rapidly that SSRIs severely inhibit your sex drive. And I was like, oh shit, this has been a while since I've been constantly horny all the time, every second of every day, just always. Because I started taking antidepressants like right after I finished going through puberty, and then I just had to go through puberty again in like a month as I withdrew from SSRIs. And there's this other thing that happens in SSRI withdrawal. They call them brain zaps, usually, is like this sort of slang term that you learn when you spend all night being like, hey, what's happening? Why is this happening? After finishing your run on SSRIs. And I don't like the term brain zap at all. It refers to a headache. It refers to a pretty intense headache. And I don't like the term brain zap, because brain zap sounds like an X-Men villain who gets decapitated by Wolverine in the first panel he's on screen. And I feel like that's not threatening. It doesn't sound like anything. It sounds like a joke. It sounds like a joke I would make, which is not what you want. Because I feel like a better name for brain zap is like skull knife. Because what it felt like is that I would be sitting there and I would have a brain zap, and it felt like a small man in a little trench coat that went down past his feet would just come up and pull out an ice pick and go like, and then I would fucking collapse to the ground sometimes. And what triggers brain zaps, as you learn, as you're taking medication less and less, is like increased blood flow, increased sort of pleasure receptors going off in your brain. So what this means is that every time I would have an orgasm, I would have a brain zap. And a brain zap could be flooring pain that would just like, I would fall out of my chair sometimes. I would have to sit down and take a nap that could last 3 hours. So I'm walking around for months at the beginning of this year, hunched over like this, just constantly achingly sexual and constantly achingly lonely, and with the knowledge that if I ever did anything to relieve myself, a small man would stab an ice pick into the back of my skull. And I was catching up with a friend of mine who's been abroad just a couple weeks ago, and he was asking me about my year, and I told him that. I told him about the SSRI withdrawal and the brain zaps and the jacking off all the time, all of it. And he said that that sounded exactly like his experiences growing up gay and Catholic. Enlarging my worldview every day. And so SSRIs are great. Withdrawing from them isn't great, but if you need them, you need them. It was important for me to take them, and now I don't. And when you make a change like that, you have to readjust parts of your life. You have to find new coping strategies. That's a lot of what you do in therapy. You learn how to deal with things that you couldn't deal with that you should be able to deal with as a human. So I had to come up with all these things that I do when I get stressed out. And I'm just going to read them off to you because I think they can help really anyone. So the first one is I went on youtube.com, the website, and I made a playlist. I made a playlist of all of the music videos in which Jay-Z and Beyonce both appear, and I play it in chronological order to watch two beautiful people fall in love. And my second strategy is a lot, do you guys know about how corporations are all our friends now? It happened, someone voted at some point, I was not invited to the vote. But corporations are all our friends now. They got Facebooks and Twitters and Tumblrs. You can check in to see what Denny is doing on a Saturday night. And it's not great. It's never great. You can check in to see what Carl's Jr. is up to. And he's doing real poorly most of the time because he never got over the death of Carl Sr. And every night he goes home to Wendy, and she just doesn't understand him anymore. But he's too afraid to find anyone else. He's got kind of a crush on this girl at work, but if he leaves Wendy, who's gonna raise Cain? Their son. So, corporations are our friends now. They got Tumblrs, Twitters, etc. I also, when I was in therapy, my therapist told me that a good way to manage depression would be to find employment, like a real job. And so I was like, that's a good idea. But I realized every job I've ever had in my whole life, I got through begging a friend of mine who already had a job to get me a job where they worked. So I went to Twitter and started asking a lot of my friends to give me jobs. I tweeted at every single Taco Bell account, international, domestic, the Taco Bell truck, which was a short-lived experiment in California. And I said, please give me a job tenderizing your meats with my bare fists. I tweeted at Funyuns, no miniaturized version called Green Funyuns. Fuck off. I could do this shit in my sleep. Tweeted at a little company called Paramount Films. Please give me a job directing one of your blockbusters. I've never made a movie before, but I feel like it's probably easy. And then the third thing that I do to cope with stress is I do comedy. I think a lot about comedy. I think a lot about ways to subvert audience expectations. For instance, doing a long ending show to like a fun kind of thing, closing a show about a pretty serious set about SSRI withdrawal, or subverting comic rule of threes in new and interesting ways. And all of those things are good, but potentially dangerous. Because you have to do everything in moderation, like the Greeks said, because they're doing great and we should follow by their example. That society never crumbled. And, you know, there's too much of those where you can kind of go crazy if you do any of them for a long time. If you keep watching the Jay-Z Beyonce video, you get exposed to a lot of pop culture. And pop culture, dangerous. It's an addictive drug. It can teach you all kinds of dangerous things, that like love is real or marriage is sustainable. And the Twitter thing, people say, hey, John, if you put your online presence like that, it's going to make it hard for you to get a job. Which I don't believe, by the way, because I'm putting myself out there asking for jobs. Come on. How do you expect me to get hired in today's society? And the comedy one is really dangerous, because when you start doing comedy for long enough, you start thinking about everything in your life as a joke, which has dangerous side effects in multiple ways. So like, first off, no one can tell if I'm being serious anymore in a regular conversation. I'll say something and they'll be like, ha-ha, and I'll be like, that was a real thing. And I call it resting bit face. So that's the way that doing comedy can fuck with other people's perceptions of you, but it also fucks with your perceptions of the world. Because also in 2015, I got a call from my father, who I had not spoken to in a bit. Not that like he's gone or anything, just we don't talk. We're two emotionally distant men. We don't talk that much. But he calls me and his opening line is, hey John, you're gonna be a brother again. Whew! I had 3 thoughts then, and my first thought was, why do you say gonna be a brother again? That implies my sisters are dead. I don't think they are. Anyone? You should have led with that. Second thought, bet I could get huge laughs if I called that baby something fucked up on a stage. Third thought, when that baby finishes high school, I'm gonna be 40. And there's gonna be a video of me calling it a cunt on stage. You know what the worst part of that bit is? Well, there's two worst parts. First worst part is that I censored myself for comedic effect. I went straight for cunt at the first thought. I didn't go like, oh, I bet I could get laughs if I called that baby something fucked up. That's something I came about because I went to an open mic where you couldn't use the C word, and I had to improvise and realize like, oh, it goes better if you just say fucked up first and then it builds. Again, comedy ruining the way I think about my own life. But the really fucked up thing is that I've held that baby in my arms, and I still do this joke. And if anything, it feels a lot better now. Because before I was like, this is rude of me, and now I just realize like, no, this is what I have to do. If I don't do this, it'll be bad. I gotta call this baby a cunt. I'm past shame. I'm done with shame in 2016. I made New Year's resolutions. First one, no more sympathy for tall or hot boys. They've had it good enough for long enough. Fuck off. Done with them. You're a tall and hot boy, you come to me with a problem? No, fuck off. You know who you could go to with your problem? Anyone. Not me. None. No sympathy. Second resolution, no moderation. I'm gonna do everything as much as I can if I think it's a good idea. I'm gonna do long sets in weird places. I'm gonna book shows. It's gonna be great. Third resolution, no shame. I'm done with shame. Do you know what shame is? Shame is when you do something and the world says that that's wrong when it usually isn't. Because when you feel shame about something, it's because everyone else was like, that's a bad idea, and you were like, but I liked that idea. No, fuck the world. What do they care? There's no reason to be ashamed about anything you do, and I believe this very sincerely. So I'm gonna start with my most shameful story of all time. I'm letting it all hang out there. You guys ever go on a vacation that sucks? So I went on a vacation a while ago with a lot of my extended family that I don't really get along with. And you can see my little sister losing her shit in the back of the room right now, realizing the story I'm about to tell in front of all these people, so you know it's good. So I was on this vacation, and it was with the extended family that I don't get along with that well, and some of my cousins were there, and they all brought a lot of friends, including one of my cousins who brought her boyfriend. And boys and girls can't sleep in the same room. That would be fucked up. So I have to share a room with this guy who I don't know, and is like, he's the kind of guy who wakes up at 6 a.m. to go jogging, and I'm the kind of guy who stays up till 3 a.m. so that when I wake up, it's too late to go jogging. But what that means is I would wander into my room, and he would be sleeping, and he's spent this entire week hanging out with my cousin, his girlfriend, it's at the beach, so she's been in bikinis and stuff, but he's also with an extended family of hers, so they can't, like, do anything, so he is massively sexually frustrated. He is me no longer taking SSRI's level of sexually frustrated. So I come in, and he's just always sleeping and just having wild sex dreams about my cousin while I'm trying to sleep, and I'm sitting there, and he's just like moaning loudly, and I'm just like, this is probably about someone else, and then he just like says her name, and I'm just like, oh, it's definitely not about someone else. This is real weird for me. So I'm not sleeping fucking a wink, and this goes on for a whole week, because what happens is everyone else wakes up, and then I have to wake up because everyone's making noise, and I haven't slept because this guy's been too busy sleep fucking all night. So I go downstairs, and this is like very end of the vacation. We're almost done with the whole thing. The ordeal is finally almost over. And my uncle, who I don't really like at all, is going on one of his classic like political rants. First, he's talking about how aliens are definitely real and already among us, which is kind of cool, but not cool when all of your other opinions are bad. That's like, if you're a smart person, I really like if you have that opinion. And if you're a dumb person, I want to fucking kick your teeth through your feet for having that opinion. So he's doing that whole thing, and then he starts moving into some conversations about AIDS and HIV, and I don't like what he's saying about it. He's got a lot of thoughts about it that I don't agree with at all. You can probably guess what they are, given associations with that disease. And I haven't slept in weeks, and I'm sitting on the couch, I'm listening to my uncle, who I don't like, talking about how like HIV is something that gay people get for being bad, which is real not cool to say ever. Even when that was cool to say, it still wasn't cool to say that. Because it was wrong then, and it's wrong now, but even more wrong because you should definitely know better by now. And so I start like sort of daydreaming, and I'm sort of flitting in and out of sleep and being awake and listening to his rant, right? So I'm just in the armchair, and he's like, oh yeah, the gays. And I'm just like, oh, I wish I had slept in the past week. And so I'm sitting there, and I start having this dream, and my uncle's driving his car. He's driving his car, he's driving his car, he's driving his car. And then he gets fucking T-boned by an 18-wheeler. And then he's in the hospital, and he's lost a lot of blood. He's got to get a transfusion. But guess what? Someone fucked up, and he gets AIDS from the blood transfusion. This is not something I'm happy that I thought, but it's what happened. And so I'm imagining him there in the hospital, and no one is visiting him. And I can hear the little life, what are they called? The little beep, beep, beep monitor. Thank you. And I'm sitting there, and I'm seeing him, and he's got all these tubes. He's withered and frail, and just beep, beep, beep. And right as he flatlines, I feel myself getting an erection. That's the most shameful thing that's ever happened to me, but I'm done with shame. I'm not ashamed of that, and neither should you. I don't know why you would be ashamed of that, but if you were, no need. The other thing that I don't believe in anymore is the concept of good or evil. Let me back up, because that's a big leap to make. We don't do good and evil. We're just regular guys. Good is something that Superman does. Evil is something that the people on the DC Metro on a Friday night do when they throw up and then look you in the eye but then don't say sorry. Most of us live on a different spectrum because there's good, there's evil, and then most of us live in this range, which is okay, shitty. You're not going to be evil, you're not going to be good, you're going to be like okay, or just kind of shitty. And that's fine. But there's an axis that I feel like we can make a big difference on. And that's the weird to normal axis. You can use, like, if you have trouble conceptualizing this, use a different word for weird, like rad. And a different word for normal, like boring. And I don't know how I feel about karma, except for that it's definitely real and definitely controls every aspect of our lives. But I've been actively trying to live a weirder, more interesting life, and I've been getting weirdness back in fun ways. First example of this, really the only good example of this, I think. This is a good standard. It shows the axis just marvelously. I started collecting VHS tapes when I stopped taking antidepressants. I don't know if those were related. They probably were, but I'm not going to look into it because it makes me happy and it's cheap. So I have this massive collection of VHS tapes now, and I bought a VHS tape from a Goodwill, which was labeled Kylie Play, February 2000. It's a tape of a second grade school play. I have watched it a lot. I have ripped the tape and put it up on YouTube, where some other people have watched it a little. I purchased someone else's precious, irreplaceable memory for $1, and now they can never have it back. I don't think that was bad of me. They gave it to the Goodwill. But I don't think that was good of me. I do think it was weird of me. And since I've been doing weird things like that, weird stuff has been coming back to me. I'm very happy about it. So a while ago, me and one of my housemates were on the DC Metro, and this guy is just the coolest weird guy I've ever seen. He's got a huge backpack, which has all kinds of carabiners and straps attached to it, water bottles. He looks like some kind of urban spelunker, if you can imagine that. One of the carabiners is attached to a leash, which is attached to a harness, which is attached to a dog, who is also wearing a little vest filled with all kinds of water bottles and canteens and carabiners. And he looks, me and my roommate are like, hey, check out that cool weird guy. And then he just turns, but we didn't say anything loud enough for it. He just turns, he kind of scans, and he sees us, locks eyes. This is breaking the social contract of not just talking to strangers in public, some weird behavior. And he says, hey, you two. And I'm briefly like, oh man, I'm not ready for this guy to ask for money. But guess what? He doesn't. Instead, he asks us a very important question I've thought about a lot since that day. He asks, you guys some kind of anarchists? Some kind of Goonies? Or just DMs? Dungeon Masters. Goonies, for the record. Straight up Goonies. So that day happened, and I was very excited about it. It was a good, weird experience for me that I was very happy to see. And then a few weeks later, it was very late at night. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and I was with a friend of mine who keeps weird hours because I know weird people who do weird things, like be up at 3 a.m. getting ready to eat their lunch. So we were walking to the 7-Eleven. He was going to purchase a muffin and a coffee, and I was going to purchase 2 Diet Cokes because at the time, 7-Eleven had a deal where it was cheaper to buy 2 Diet Cokes, and I was honest with myself. I knew it wasn't the last Diet Coke of my life. So we're walking there, and outside the 7-Eleven is parked a cool van. You ever see a cool van? It's blue. It's got white spray paint all over the sides. It says, "This vehicle protected by God's armor," in spray paint. And then on the hood of the car, someone has tied the head of a stuffed animal, like a dragon or maybe a T-Rex, tied it to the hood of the car. And we were like, this is the coolest van we've ever seen in our whole lives. We open the 7-Eleven and are immediately, oh, there's the proprietors of that van. You can tell because they look like fucking freaks. One of them is wearing a hoodie, which is printed with the Pokemon card you got if you went to see the first Pokemon movie in theaters, and has a septum piercing, and his hair is 4 different colors. And the other ones are all crowded by the nacho cheese dispenser. You know, the free chili and cheese you can get on your hot dog at a 7-Eleven. And they're yelling at each other very rapidly and putting all the cheese and chili on all sorts of non-hot dog food. They're putting it on egg biscuits. They're putting it on croissants. And then one of them looks at me and makes eye contact. Again, breaking the social contract. Weird. And he starts yelling at me in German. And I say, I don't speak German. I'm really sorry. It's... And he's like, oh. And he goes back to putting fucking chili on his egg biscuit. And then we walk out and we're like, those guys were so weird. That was so cool. And we're walking home and we hear from behind us someone yell, hey, you two. We turn around and it's that guy who yelled at me in German. He spoke English with an American accent the whole time, but it did not occur to him to do that in the 7-Eleven when he needed help, just outside when he was harassing us. And he said to us, you ever take like a hard-boiled egg and then like a pickle and eat them at the same time? And we said, no, we'd never done that. Never thought to. And he said, I just did. It was fucking awesome. You should try it. You guys got any vodka? And we said, no, we don't have any vodka. And he said, oh. Then he turned around and started walking back to his rad van. And he looked up at the moon and he screeched to the heavens, vodka! Directly to the moon. And I believe in him. He's on the weird axis. He's really far gone on the weird axis. He lives an interesting life. And I'm sure that he could get what he wanted from the moon if he just phrased it a little differently. He was asking for the wrong drink. He wanted moonshine. This has been Space Jokes Episode 4. I would like to thank everyone from the city who made the mistake of letting us do this. I would like to thank everyone at Mason Improv. I would like to thank all of the people who performed. I would like to thank Roberto for helping film. Thank you all. Have a great night. Get the fuck out of here.